Imagine a machine designed for a war where no bridge would remain intact, no road would survive, no city would be left alive, only a scorched, radiation-poisoned wasteland. 60 tons of armor capable of deflecting the shockwave of a nuclear blast. A tank that didn't get stuck in swamps because it exerted less ground pressure than a light truck. And despite all this, it was killed without a single shot. Not by NATO shells, not by radiation, not by saboteurs. It was killed by one man from a podium and its own running gear. The year is 1955. The Soviet Union has just weathered Stalin's death. The arms race is in full swing, and at the Kirov plant in Leningrad, designer Lev Troyanov receives a task that on paper looks like pure madness. Create a tank capable of fighting in the conditions of nuclear war. Not just survive near a blast, but wage war after it. To move across radioactive sludge where nothing remains but ash and craters. Troyanov was no novice by then. Behind him were the heavy KV series tanks and participation in the development of the IS-2. Honestly, when I began studying his biography, I was surprised by how little has been written about him compared to what he actually accomplished. Most publications about Object 279 either don't mention his name at all or do so only in passing. And yet, this is his machine, from the first bolt to the final test. The problem Troyanov faced was fundamental. A tank for nuclear war had to be heavy, very heavy. Armor capable of withstanding shrapnel, blast pressure, penetrating radiation, that's mass. But the heavier the tank, the more pressure it exerts on the ground. And the ground after a nuclear strike isn't asphalt. It's plowed up earth mixed with water. A conventional heavy tank would simply sink in such conditions. Literally. The solution Troyanov devised was unconventional. Not one set of tracks like everyone else. 2 sets, 4 track belts. The machine stands on 4 parallel tracks instead of 2. The result, ground pressure drops to 0.6 kilograms per square centimeter. To understand the scale, that's less than a truck. 60 tons of steel and armor, and yet the machine doesn't bog down in a swamp. In effect, we have a working miracle. Now, about the hull. Object 279 looks like an alien from another planet. It's no accident it was nicknamed the Flying Saucer. The silhouette is a cast ellipsoid, without a single right angle, without protruding parts. A shell hitting such a hull simply deflects tangentially. The ricochet is ensured by geometry, not just metal thickness. Armor on the frontal projection, 270 millimeters at steep angles of inclination. This is a level at which most Western anti-tank guns of that era would have been useless. But there's a nuance. The ellipsoid profile isn't pure armor. Part of this egg consists of non-removable external fuel tanks integrated directly into the hull contours. A dual-purpose solution. They maintain the shape and, upon impact by a shaped charge shell, are meant to act as an additional screen. The fuel partially dissipates the shaped charge jet before it meets the main armor. It sounds risky, but the calculation was that the shell's penetrating power would be neutralized precisely in this layer. Next, the turret. The main armament of Object 279 is the 130 mm rifled gun M65. 130 mm, that's the level of heavy coastal artillery, not a tank gun. A semi-automatic loading mechanism, a stereoscopic rangefinder sight. Technologies that in 1958 were far from commonplace. The first shot from this gun could destroy any Western tank of the period at a range where return fire would already be pointless. But the price for this is the crew. The turret is so packed with equipment, so geometrically compressed under the aerodynamic silhouette, that the men inside literally lacked air. Propellant gases after firing couldn't be fully evacuated in time. The crew worked under conditions of constant poisoning. Imagine, you're sitting in a steel egg. Outside is a radioactive wasteland, and inside, after every shot, there's nothing to breathe. That's what cramped turret translates to in human terms. In Mikhail Baryatinsky's book, Soviet Heavy Tanks, the evolution of post-war Soviet heavy tank design is examined in detail. There, it's clearly seen how Object 279 stands in this chain, as the final, extreme point of an entire design school, a machine in which they tried to solve all problems simultaneously, mobility, survivability under nuclear strike, firepower, protection against shaped-charge munitions. In effect, they tried to fit the unfittable, and they almost succeeded. Almost. The 1959 trials showed the machine in all its glory and in all its contradictions. Mobility, phenomenal. Protection, at a level Soviet tank building had not yet reached. But then, the running gear. 4 tracks, that's an engineering marvel, but it's also a logistical nightmare. The outer tracks could still be serviced if necessary. The inner ones, physically inaccessible. To reach the inner pair, a substantial part of the hull had to be dismantled. In a repair shop setting, lengthy and complex. In field conditions, in mud, under fire, with radiation background, impossible. Want to understand the scale of this problem? Recall the German Tiger, a machine whose transmission took 3 days to replace in repair shops with specialized tools. The German army lost a significant portion of its Tigers not to Soviet shells. They simply abandoned them because field repair was impossible. Soviet military science knew this lesson. And now, they were grappling with the same problem in their own design, only squared. Yes, you heard correctly. A machine designed with others' mistakes in mind repeated the same mistake at a new level of complexity. And here enters Nikita Khrushchev. July 1960, Kapustin Yar Test Range.
The General Secretary looks at the latest developments and utters what would reshape Soviet military doctrine for the next decade. The gist: the future belongs to missile systems. Tanks are obsolete. Heavy ones, even more so. Why a 60-ton monster when a guided missile destroys it from several kilometers away? This is nicely called a technological leap, strategic vision. But in reality, it was the dismantling of an entire design school that had accumulated colossal experience over 15 post-war years. That's it. Heavy tanks, scrapped. Object 279 to the museum. Honestly, I don't know how to assess this decision. On one hand, Khrushchev was right that anti-tank missile systems truly changed the battlefield balance. The IT-1 missile tank destroyer, which replaced the heavy machines, is a real class of weaponry that found its place. On the other hand, to shut down an entire direction with one decision based on political preferences, although, wait, this is part 1 of 2. In Stalin's Steel Fist, Svirin shows that the picture is more complex. The military establishment itself was ambivalent about Object 279, even before its prohibition. The running gear was indeed a problem without an obvious solution. The progress of anti-tank weaponry was indeed accelerating, but all of this does not negate the fact that the final decision was made in a political context, not an engineering one. Look at what we have in the end. Object 279 is a machine that solved one problem brilliantly while simultaneously creating another, practically unsolvable one. Armor that cannot be pierced, running gear that cannot be repaired, a gun that kills anyone and slowly poisons its own crew. The sole-built specimen now stands in the museum in Kubinka. They say that even under museum lighting, this machine produces a strange impression. Too alien, too wrong for a tank, too perfect for something else, something that has no name. Here's what haunts me about this story. Troyanov built the perfect machine for a war that never began. Khrushchev shut it down in favor of weapons that also were never used for their intended purpose. Both were right, each in their own version of a future that never came to pass. This is not a story of winners and losers. It is a story of how people try to predict a war that does not yet exist and create tools for it that will never be used as intended. Be sure to write in the comments what to review in the next video. See you soon! This is part 2 of 2.